Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm Alan Saunders. That's Nick Farabaugh. We're bringing the draft talk to you every day in the month of April leading up to the 2023 NFL Draft. Talking Steelers. Talking the NFL Draft today, we're talking quarterback as the Steelers hosted Houston quarterback Clayton Tune over at the South Side today. And or was it yesterday? No, maybe we just got the news that he's coming yesterday. I'm not sure when exactly he'll be here, but interesting, right? They used a first-round draft pick on Kenny Pickett last year, quarterback. They also used a seventh-round draft pick on Chris Oladokun last year and sort of seemed to waste it. Nick, what's the idea about a quarterback for the Steelers in this draft? And is this realistic? Could they actually draft a quarterback in this year's draft?
Yeah, sure. I mean, listen, Mitch Trubisky's got 1 year left on his deal, and besides him, there's no one else on the roster. So, yeah, it's definitely something to look at. I don't think it's a high priority idea, but I think if the right guy's there, that can be a future backup to Kenny Pickett. I think sure. I think it's definitely something to invest in. I don't expect to see Mason Rudolph back. So he's still out there. I mean, that is still a possibility if they really want to do that. They could just run it back with the same quarterback room they did last year. But I think they need to look for the future, and I think they do need a backup quarterback. It's low on the needs list just because I think they have a lot more bigger fish to fry. But with one of those seventh round picks, yeah, I think it's definitely something that we can look into because they just don't have anyone there that they have really invested in. It was supposed to be Chris Oladokun, and then they just kind of gave up on that last year. So they need someone. I'm not sure if that guy's going to necessarily be drafted. I think it's possible, but I also think it's possible they just add two UDFAs.
Yeah, I don't think they'll do two UDFAs. I think they'll get somebody. I think they'll sign somebody or draft somebody, but I think they'll get somebody they want to groom into a future backup. The idea of paying a backup $10 million is not sustainable going forward, right? Like that's fine for this year. They really want Mitch Trubisky. They like the way he worked with Kenny Pickett. Like that can't be the long-term plan. Now you can go get somebody. Who did the Jets sign today?
Tim Boyle.
Yeah, right. I mean, you can go get that guy, sure, and nobody cares, whatever. But I think the Steelers would rather to build their own. And it's very interesting because I think, like the Steelers pick of Chris Oladokun, which seemed wasted last year because they just had no room for him on their roster, right? He never even got a chance to take a snap in minicamp, let alone actually have any chance of making the team. Now, fast forward a year, it's like, oh, this is not only a guy that could make this team, but now they're talking about this rule to put in a third quarterback to be able to play all the time. Now this could be somewhat of a useful role to have somebody there to do that. And with Trubisky's contract expiring after this year, sort of fill that role as Kenny Pickett's backup going forward. We just saw last year in Brock Purdy, just because the quarterback gets drafted in the seventh round doesn't mean he has to be a waste of a draft pick. The Steelers did waste that draft pick last year. I think it would actually be a far better idea for them to use one of those seventh round picks on a quarterback this year.
Yeah, I mean, they threw Oladokun into a three-way quarterback battle where he could not get a single rep until the second to last day of training camp, where he got two. He didn't play in the preseason nearly at all. And so they cut bait with him basically. Either one, they didn't think he was good right out of the gutter, so why'd you draft him? Or two, they just cut him without knowing what he was. And that is also not great. So this time around, you have a huge hole where there's significant reps on a training camp roster to be filled. Like Mitch Trubisky is going to be the second team. Well, who's the third team quarterback? There's not one right now. So
And the
there could
Steelers have
be.
usually had four. Now, I don't know if they will continue to do that after what happened with Oladokun last year, but typically have had four quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think they will because typically also that fourth quarterback would get some significant reps because last year was different, right? Where the 1 through 3 were all kind of filtering from QB3 to QB2 to QB1, and it was all kind of like this. It was musical chairs by the time it was over by the end of training camp. But this time around, that QB3 is not going to be competing for anything. They're going to be QB3, right? It's going to be more like Dwayne Haskins was with his first year here, where he was getting some decent reps. But if you remember, he still got a lot of run whenever they let him get an opportunity. So it's certainly something to me that I think they'll look into. I think they will do that. I think they're going to add at least one rookie to this group just to kind of look at the class as a whole. I still don't think it's a great group, but I think it's a group where they can find someone that can maybe become that. And I certainly think that they will add either a veteran or a rookie, and then they'll add a UDFA. So I think they'll go into camp with 4 quarterbacks, and I think it makes sense to draft one late just because, okay, you have nothing invested in the future outside of Kenny Pickett. You still need a backup. You can play the musical chairs at the backup game, but you can also get Kenny's best friend that like Ben was with Josh Dobbs, and that could also be a very useful tool for Kenny Pickett as he's growing up in his NFL career.
Yeah, now we brought Clayton Tune in, or bringing Clayton Tune in for a visit. Houston Cougars quarterback. Interesting little connection here, right? Played for Dana Holgerson at Houston, runs a variation of an air raid offense. Glenn Thomas, the Steelers' new offensive assistant, also came up under Mike Leach and Sonny Dykes in that scheme. So a little bit of air raid influence. I know he's also worked for Matt Rule, who runs a completely different kind of offense. So not really sure what he's going to bring to the table, but there is at least a little bit of a connection there. I wrote about him extensively on the site. If you want to know more about Clayton Tune, go to SteelersNow.com and I'll tell you more than you ever needed to know about a guy who's going to be drafted in the 7th round. Who else, though, if it's not him? What are the other options for the Steelers if they're looking for a guy that might be available in the 7th round? Tune projected to be a 5th round pick. So really, the Steelers don't have a pick there. They'd have to hope for him to fall to them. Who are some of the other guys, though, if they're going to use one of those 7th round picks on a quarterback that could be available to them?
Dorian Thompson Robinson has been someone that they've kind of been connected to a little bit throughout the process. They saw him live at the Shrine game, so he's an interesting player to me. Good arm, he's mobile. He could be a guy that has seemed to really get some interest, and he's not a bad quarterback. Malik Cunningham to me is a guy that they could look at there. It depends on the level of mobility they want, but he makes some sense to me. You look at Tune. Max Duggan could be an interesting player, I think. I
Tune and
like
Duggan were
his
both at the Senior Bowl, so they're at least a little bit familiar with those guys. One of the things I wrote about Tune was, they sent all defensive coaches to the Senior Bowl. So, like maybe Mike Tomlin saw something, but really that, this workout in Pittsburgh is where they're going to actually do some evaluating in person with like someone that has an offensive background.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. I'll also throw out another name, Tyson Bagent from Shepherd. I think he's an interesting pick, not too far from Pittsburgh either. Out there in that kind of corner of West Virginia, where you don't hear many football players coming out of. So he's a guy that we saw down at the Senior Bowl, and the dude's arm is just a rocket. I mean, there was, I think it was Thursday of that week where it was windy and the back wind was killing all the quarterbacks. And he was just going, whew, whew. Now that accuracy is definitely spotty and it's not completely there, but the tools are there. They're kind of interesting to me. I think he could be an interesting player to look at. Jaron Hall is another guy I think that could be interesting out of BYU. He had an interesting year. He's a little bit older too. I think he's actually older than Kenny Pickett, which is kind of crazy. That's kind of those guys. It's not a truly deep quarterback class. Lindsey Scott out of Incarnate Words, another guy. They had a meeting with him at I think it was the Shrine, might have been the NFLPA. I can't remember which one, but
the NFLPA Bowl.
Yeah.
FCS record-breaking quarterback at the FCS level. I honestly could see that being like a guy like Bagent or him. Like I could see that being the road that go down. Obviously, they had some success. You could call it a success. They found a good one in Duck Hodges. I think the Steelers are kind of comfortable. They went back to that level with Oladokun. Like, I think they'd be okay with an FCS or a Division II quarterback.
Yeah, and another guy I wanted to mention, Aiden O'Connell out of Purdue. I think he's a very interesting player. I think he might be a little bit out of their range. I think he'll probably end up going a little earlier. Like, I think he'll go probably around the range where a Jake Hayner will go. But I think O'Connell's pretty interesting. He's a really bright dude. He's got a lot of their traits that they really like too. He's pretty mobile. He's able to throw off platform. I think he could be a really good backup in this league. So there's enough guys that are in that range where if they want a guy, they'll get a guy. It's again, it's not like a great class. Also,
one last name I want to throw out there, and I just want to get your reaction to it: Stetson Bennett. Not a guy with great tools. Obviously, had a lot of success in college, and then really seemed to muck up his pre-draft process. Turned down an opportunity to go to the Senior Bowl, gets arrested for public intoxication instead. And I haven't heard his name spoken of in a draft conversation since then. But if you're just throwing a flyer 7th-round pick on a guy, would you take a shot at him?
I think he's going earlier. I do. The NFL likes winner DNA. It's kind of what he has. I don't even think the Steelers are going to like him that much. In regards to that,
I don't like him. I mean, he's a 5'11"
no,
quarterback. Like what? Like I
I,
don't.
I, I can't. I can't see them drafting him. A
Okay.
guy I could see them maybe going after, as like a fourth quarterback, or that is. This was interesting. Note, at Duquesne Pro Day, which was the same day as Pitt's Pro Day, Corey Curtis, the Gannon quarterback, worked out, and apparently the Steelers were the ones that had requested him to go there. So that to me says fourth quarterback alert possible. And I'll tell you what, this has like I'm having flashbacks to Roland Rivers when he was at Slippery Rock and he kept coming into Steeler minicamp and all of that. Corey Curtis out of Gannon. You want to mention there? That could be the guy.
I'll give one more place that I think that we could find the answer to this question. And Roland Rivers, look at spring football. You could see the Steelers finding a guy that, maybe not for mini camp, but for training camp time, that's currently playing the XFL or currently playing, going to play in the USFL. Those guys, that's where they get this opportunity. I could see them taking a chance on one of those guys too.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. Another guy I do have to throw out because he's within a few hours of Pittsburgh and he played a long time at Penn State, Sean Clifford. I have to throw out that name. I've never been a big Sean Clifford fan. But I could see them bring him on board as a UDFA.
Speaking of those XFL guys, Ben DiNucci, been very good.
Yeah.
Seattle Secret Dragons, could see it happening.
Certainly.
Pitt and JMU. Another JMU quarterback in the draft class as well. His successor there, Todd Centeo. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it, but he's a pretty well thought after guy that could be available maybe as a 7th rounder or as a UDFA as well. Lots of good options there. I do expect the Steelers to draft a quarterback or add a quarterback somehow between now and the start of the regular season. Probably will be the last time we talk about quarterback, though, as there are a lot of positions I think are far more interesting for the Steelers in this draft. We'll continue that job tomorrow here at Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Make sure to check out SteelersNow.com. Clayton Toon stories up there. All kinds of coverage about the Steelers and the 2023 NFL Draft. That's Nick. I'm Alan. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again next time. Until then, enjoy.